All right, everybody. Gonna do a tutorial today about pitcher injuries and things that I do to try to mitigate the seemingly absurd amount of pitcher injuries you run into in this game. I don't mean absurd like unrealistic, but MLB pitcher injuries have just become crazy high, increasingly so over the last several years. So in this game, in my out of the park game, I probably don't have as many injuries to keep it as realistic as Major League Baseball, but I just find the game more playable with the amount that I have. I still have a decent number of disruptive injuries, but it's not like I've got 6 starting pitchers down at a time, as I found in previous versions. So I'm here under game settings, players and face gen. You can adjust the injury frequency. I believe high, realistic modern day is the default. I go down to normal, out of the park, classic. And I think I've played like that the last 2 versions of Out of the Park. If I'm not mistaken, I've changed to that. I'm not sure when realistic modern day high became the default. I can't remember, but I do lower it to the normal Out of the Park classic. So that obviously has an impact on the amount of injuries I have and why maybe my injuries are lower than what you might see in your sim if you're playing on the default. Another thing that I do, and this video might have some small spoilers, some Maytime spoilers for people who follow my fake Orioles series, because I haven't aired an update on that team with these current stats. But anyways, so go to my trainer here. I got Scott Behringer, and so he's at arm injuries. He's great, really, at preventing them. Really, I normally look for outstanding, excellent, or legendary in this. But at the time, I needed a new trainer because my trainer retired. This was the best guy out there, and his is his third year with me, and I had the thought to maybe replace him after the first season with somebody who had a better prevent arm injuries, because that's the first thing I look at. But there hasn't many that popped up, and my injuries have actually been pretty good with this guy, even better than the last couple seasons with my guy who had a better rating in preventing arm injuries. So preventing arm injuries and healing arm injuries really are the two I look to first, and obviously I want him to have a good reputation overall, at least great or better, and really nothing lower than great here. In heal other, he is good. That's fine. He's generally so good at all the other things, and it's just an other injury. Now, if this was like arms or preventing arm injuries, I probably would not go to him. But his track record's been good with me, and I'm going to stick with him for now. But really, when you're looking for a trainer, I would recommend definitely look at everything. Don't take a guy who is, say, legendary in preventing arm injuries and fair and everything else. But I would say prioritize preventing arm injuries and healing arm injuries, because that can really, really just wreck your pitching season quickly if you lose, 3 guys from your starting rotation early in the season or something like that. So keep an eye on that for sure. And like I said, look at the whole picture. Don't just look at the arm injuries, but definitely that's what I go to first. And now the next stuff I'm going to move to, I fully admit is a bit anecdotal. Not a bit anecdotal, it is anecdotal. The evidence I'm going to give for how well this strategy of turning down the injuries, and then the trainer thing, and then the next thing I'm going to talk about, pitch counts, is extremely anecdotal. I haven't looked under the hood at the game. I haven't ran like a big study in a fictional league to see kind of how this plays out. So I am just talking about my experience, which is generally not as valuable as like a big study, but hopefully can still provide some insight for something you might do in your league. So if you go to my pitching staff, I have all of my starters, even, and all these guys are, well, not all of them are veterans, but many of them are. And I don't let anybody throw more than 95 pitches in my rotation. If they're younger, sometimes I put it even at 90. This guy, I think, is 25, and it's his first full season as a starter. So he's at 90, everybody else at 95. And with my prospects, I do similar things, sometimes even lower. You can see I've got these guys at 85 and 80. And when I go to Bowie, I think it's probably similar. Oh, forgot to do it with that guy. Some of these guys I have at 90. But if they're guys that I think might be legit prospects or coming up to my major league team soon, then I limit them to 80 or 85. Oh, we got a guy pending injury there, Ron Walters. So that is one thing that, again, it could just be coincidence. It could just be my mind tricking me. But it seems to me, when I instituted pitch counts to all my starters, which is something I didn't do until probably over halfway into this sim, I think, with the Orioles and Out of the Park 21, after playing numerous previous versions of Out of the Park, my arm injuries went way down. It seems to me. And I've read on the Out of the Park Reddit of people who've had similar experiences. Again, it would help to have actual data on this to prove it, but I would recommend limiting your starters to 90 or 95 pitches. Now, if it's going to annoy you, if they're in the, through 8 1/3 and having given up 3 hits and no runs, and your manager takes them out in an 11-0 ball game and they don't get the complete game shutout, if it's going to annoy you, they do that. Maybe don't do this, because I don't really get complete games too often, and I don't really care that I don't get complete games. But it's it's just kind of funny sometimes when I've had guys taken out after 8 2/3 of shutout ball and they get it taken out with nobody on base with like a 6-run lead. So pretty funny, but just be prepared for that. And I'll just kind of show you the experience I've had with the injuries on these guys and some other guys that have been through my team. Again, some anecdotal evidence, but maybe will help convince you that this is worth doing. So this guy, Ignacio Aguilar, he's a normal injury proneness. I got him before the 2031 season. And so you can see before the 2031 season, I'm now in 2033. So he's on his third year with me, and he's had one injury, day-to-day, strained back 3 to 4 weeks. Now, before that, from 2028 to 2030, he was only on the IL. Well, he only had 2 injuries that weren't day-to-day. He was out 7 months with an elbow injury, out 5 weeks with a back injury, and then had multiple day-to-day injuries with substantial effects. So he probably went on the IL for those. So, that's just one guy, but there are pretty much every guy I show you, you're going to see that, to where once he pitched for me, he didn't have as many injuries. So Ben Schilt is a guy that I drafted in 2025. It's now 2033. Has not had a single injury, which that's some luck too. He's got a durable injury rating now. Steve Donovan is a guy that I brought in before the 2030 season. And you can see had 2027 had an injury, 2028 had 3 injuries, 2029 had an injury, and he was on, a couple of these, a 4 weeks and a 7-week injury. For me, he's had 3 day-to-day injuries since 2030, and it's now 2033, and 2 of them were for 2 days, and the other one was a finger blister for 2 weeks. So really good clean bill of health with me. And Emilio Caldera is a guy that I brought in 2024 as a scouting discovery. His injury history, every single one is day-to-day. It's never been more than 1 to 2 weeks one time. Or no, here's a 2-week one on a strained back last season. But other than that, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. So he has not missed significant time. Sanchez has been around forever, and he's an Iron Man. And he's also been on my team off and on. Like I've traded him for him at the deadline at multiple times. But he's pitched for me in 2030, 31, 32, and 33 for parts of all those seasons. And you can see he's just never really had any injuries, though. But, 20, 21, 23, 26. And then since he's been with me, 1 day cold. But none of these are real injuries. And so then I also have 2 dudes who pitch a lot of innings out of the bullpen for me, if I can get back to that screen. There we are. McKinley Moore is the guy who's the starting pitcher who's now in my bullpen. He started before he came to me. But you can see pitches, 107 innings for me, 88 and a third innings for me. And he's got a normal injury rating and his injury history. And I got him, by the way, in July of 2029. And so he had a few injuries and shoulder inflammation in 2027. And since he's come to me, he's only had 1 injury that put him on the IL. It was 6 weeks oblique strain. But, he didn't get too many injuries over that entire time. But as you can see, even as he's gotten older at 34 now, still has not shown really any sign of breaking down. Now, that's not necessarily pitch count related because it's in my bullpen. This would be probably more my injury settings and also my trainer. Same thing with this guy, Dave Correa. It's probably a little redundant to show you him, but same thing with him. He just hadn't had many injuries. And I'll show you, this was, again, want to stress that this is anecdotal evidence, which isn't my favorite to justify a position. But here I'm going to look at my starters over the course of my Orioles franchise. And we got this guy. Where'd he go? Jesus Corrales. He was with me. Let's see. He was with me. He came over early in the 2030 season. Then he pitched for me for 2031 and 2032, and then he went to sign with the Dodgers. So he's got a fragile injury history. And as you can see, 23 had 4 injuries, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. And then, when did I say I came over to? I lost track. 20, sorry. He came over to me in the middle of the 2030 season. And then 29, he was out for 10 months with elbow reconstruction, ligament reconstruction. And then he came back in 2030. He pitched half a year for me in 2030, was completely healthy. 2031, he had 1 injury with a sore elbow, did not require an IL stent. And then 2032, the wheels started to come off a little bit. 5 injuries for me, but only 1 required an IL stint. The other 3, or the other 4, were all day-to-day injuries. So, he had a season and a half with pretty much a clean bill of health as a fragile player. And then in the 3rd season, started to hit a wall a bit, but still no major injury. And then he went to the Dodgers this offseason, and about a week into spring training, he went out. He's been out for 2 months, so it's a 3-month injury on his elbow. So, again, that's just one dude. Doesn't prove that he was healthier because he was with me, but that's kind of the pattern, though, is I've been able to keep players healthier when they're with me than before or after. So, again, think about that injury setting if you want to turn that down, but definitely have a good trainer, and then set your pitch limits, I would say, as a max of 95 for your starting pitchers on your major league team, and I say 80 or 85 for your prospects, especially if they're legit pitching prospects. If they're just kind of filler, whatever, 95, or just don't give them a limit. But if they're guys you see coming to your major league team someday, 80, 85. Any questions about that, just let me know, or if you've had a different experience with it, definitely let me know in the comments.